Welcome everybody. Today we would be talking about design heuristics and evaluation. And before I begin, I want to apologize for going MIA because it was my last semester of my university and I was really caught up with a lot of work assignments. Right now that I'm done, I think I would be posting almost every other week. I'll try to. That's what my plan is, but sorry about missing out on the last few months. It was a wild ride for me as well. So without further ado, let's get back to it. So today we are going to look into some of the methods, and one of the most important ones that's used in UX, and it's called design heuristics and evaluation. So let's look into what it is. At first, I would talk about what design heuristics is, and then we'll talk about the 10 design heuristics. This is the person who wrote about this. And then we will talk about conducting evaluation. And then lastly, we'll shortly just recap about everything that we have learned so far. At the end, I have something really special because that is going to help you really remember whatever you are going to go through right now. So what is design heuristics? So it's basically just a guideline or more of like a rule of thumb that most designers use to generate, evaluate, and improve designs. So there's three things that they do. They generate, evaluate, and improve designs. And this is more of like a framework, right? And this also depends on three things. The first thing being context, and second being the type of design that you're making, whether or not it's a mobile design or a web design. And lastly, it's about the specific problem being addressed. Of course, we cannot target every problems, but specifically we have to be very discreet about the problem that we're trying to solve. So yeah, this whole process depends on these three things. So yeah, let's keep going. So the first one being visibility of system status. Let's see what does that really mean. I've directly coded whatever it says on the Nielsen Norman group from their website. So I've directly coded it from the Nielsen Norman website. So if I take you there, you're going to see this is the website I collected most of the information from. And of course, I've credited them as to whatever is taken from there. So it says the design should always keep users informed about what is going on through appropriate feedback within a reasonable amount of time. So what does that mean? So I'm quite sure a lot of you have experienced any of these interfaces. So whenever you're copying and pasting a file, it informs you that it's being pasted. Then when there's not internet on your Chrome, the internet doesn't work, you probably get something like this so that you can play around and get by with your time. And in iOS, this is the loading screen time, which all three keeps you informed. Then it needs to communicate to you with the confirmation. So this is also a visibility thing. So this is also something that has to be visible. So let's say on Twitter or Instagram, when you tap on you probably see a feedback that pops up. And then also on Facebook, when there's a friend request and you click on something, the change in color shows you that it has confirmed that whether or not you have confirmed something or deleted something. Then there's your design should be able to provide immediate feedback. And lastly, it should encourage the users to act. So there's many ways to do that. One of the ways is using haptic feedbacks, or there could be sounds. So it has to be able to engage with our senses in some sort of way so that we are informed. Again, we're informed that there's a feedback that yes, it has worked. So, and also it should also encourage the users to act. There's those call to action buttons and all of that makes the user want to take an action. So yeah, overall, this is the visibility of system status. Secondly, there has to be a match between the system and the real world. And why is that important? Because a lot of people tend to relate with things from experience. And because we have experienced everything in the real world, and if we come across something online that represents that, it's easier for us to make a connection. So let's see what does the website say. So it says that the design should speak the user's language, use words, phrases, and concepts. Remember, words, phrases, and concepts familiar to the user rather than internal jargon. You don't have to use techie words which people wouldn't understand. So you make sure that whenever you're designing or doing the evaluation, make sure to avoid jargons as much as possible. Follow a real-world convention, making information appear in a natural and logical order. And let's see what does that mean. So use specific and familiar languages for users. So see, I highlighted these two words that says specific and familiar. This is very important because you want to be as specific as you can. You don't want to sound vague because people can interpret a lot of other meanings out of it. It has to be familiar with what the user already knows. So let's say online shopping, like you put something on the cart and then you press add to cart online, and you do the same thing in the malls. And also you have a bin in the office or at your home, and then that's why it's emphasized that you have to use specific and familiar languages. Let's see what Audible has done here. So you can see that they have like a magnifying glass, which is universal for a search icon. Almost everybody now today knows this because everybody's familiar with it. Then you can see this is like a button. People have had interacted with buttons for a long time, and now they're familiar with how that's supposed to look like. And then there's this cover art that shows like what the book is going to look like if you download it. And then there's also a button that says that this is a sample, that you can try it. And also, you see, like it follows a very logical hierarchy that shows that how people are supposed to read through this page and how they're going to flow from one end to the other. So I really like it. Third, you should make sure that you provide user control and freedom. So let's see, what does that mean? User often perform actions by mistake. They need a clear marked emergency exit to leave the unwanted action without having to go through an extended process. So let's say you have filled up a form and you just want to exit through it, but instead of that, what it makes you do is like you have to keep going back, all the way back to the initial step, and then from there you get to exit it. Now imagine how frustrating can that be, right? So let's see. This is so this is like one of the web apps, or I think like an app by Delta Airline, if I'm correct. But let's see, what did they say? Always allow users to go back a step. So whenever users click a link to open a new page, screen or view, they should always be able to go back where they came from. So you see that there's a back option on the screen, and then there's also like whenever you are canceling it, it prompts you that would you like to start a new flight search? And see, this gives you an option to it gives you a very clear option to choose from, whether or not you want to exit this or whether or not you want to continue from where you have whatever you have been doing, like continue your booking. Then there's these two other websites. The first one here, the second one saying that you need to meet the user's expectation when using a backlink. You can see like if they use a backlink here, it just exits. And on this one, you got to make sure that the exit link is easily discoverable, right? Because like a physical space, exit should be easy to find and well signposted so that they will be discovered when needed. I think it's really tough here to exit through this because it doesn't give you like a cross mark or anything, so it's really hard to know where to click. So this is a bad practice. You should avoid this. You should allow users to easily cancel an action, right? So you see like on Twitter, there's a cancel option. I think it's X now. So there's a cancel option that should be easy to find and quick to execute, as you can see here. And then there's you should also provide them with an undo support option, right? So this is the Notes app on the iPhone. And I think if you tap 4 fingers at once, or you pretty much like shake the phone, you should get something like this that says like you want to redo or undo the text, whatever you have written. And I think this would be the last one that says like, you got to also ensure that undo is discoverable. So remember the shake to undo features on iOS? Yeah. So this feature is notoriously underused because it's too hard to discover. So yeah, you can see like whenever we delete something on Drive, it quickly prompts that something has been renamed to this and you can still undo it. So it provides an option button here right next to it. And also this is the interface for iOS. Talking about consistency and standard, you got to make sure that throughout the whole design process, your entire design maintains the same consistency and the same standards all throughout. If something looks like apples, and if your end product looks like oranges, it's gonna be like two separate things, and you're probably like end up with a completely different design. And that's why this is like really important. Users should not have to wonder whether different words, situations, or actions mean the same thing. Follow platform and industry conventions, definitely. So a lot of you who have used Microsoft Suite, you would probably know that the header is pretty much the same all across each three of the applications. So if you're using Word, you would see that each of these tabs are familiar. If you're using Excel, these tabs are also familiar. And if you're using PowerPoint, these tabs are also familiar. So what does that say? It maintains consistency and standards throughout, no matter what the app is, because of how people tend to remember things. This forms sort of like a mental model, which makes it easier for the user to stick with the app, because it's just so useful to switch from one to another, because they don't have to learn or relearn how to browse through this, which says that which relates to consistency within a product or a family of product, of course. So you can see like this is a whole family of Google product, and these three for Microsoft. And if you go here, we can look at the external consistency, which refers to the established conventions in an industry or on the web at large beyond an application family or applications. You can see like a lot of these websites have quite a similar like search bar. Maybe the icons are and the writings are left or right, but overall it's quite the same, that whenever we come across the search bar, we would be familiar that, oh, this is consistent. We know what this is, because you have this entire mental model of what search is supposed to look like. Then you got to focus on layers of consistency. I mean, this is like a subsection of consistency, but what does that say? There are several layers of consistency to consider when designing your application. As you're designing and evaluating your site, aim to maintain consistency in each of the following categories. So as you can see, there's like the visuals, which is quite the same. And then there's the page and button layouts, which also follows the same colors and everything throughout. So again, there's the visual, there's the layout, there's the button and pages, then there's content, the user enter data. But on this one, you can see that Photoshop takes a lot of time to learn, but WhatsApp has taken less time because people are already familiar with a lot of like texting apps. So that could be one of the reasons, but this is a software that's not used by almost every people, but like mostly designers. And yeah, so you got to make sure that you lower the learning curves, and you also got to make sure that you meet the user expectation. So if someone's dragging and dropping a picture on the Notes app or whatever, it should appear there, because the user is expecting that when you drop it there, it's supposed to just pop in. So you got to meet user expectations. Now we're going to talk about like error preventions. What are some of the things that you could do to prevent errors? And let's say, what do they talk about? Good error messages are important, but the best design carefully prevent problems from occurring in the first place. Either eliminate error-prone conditions or check for them and present users with a confirmation option before they commit to action. Well, I think it's like pretty self-explanatory, but let's look into the two types of user errors. So the first one being slips, and then there's mistakes. So slips occurs when users intend to perform one action but end up doing another action, but which is also quite often similar to what they intended to do. But mistakes are often when users have goals that are inappropriate for the current problem or task. Even if they take the right step to complete their goals, the step will result in an error. So we can see here that human errors are divided into two parts, as we talked here, which are sleeps and mistakes. And if you want, you can take a screenshot of this, but the sleeps are done through action-based slips and memory lapse, and mistakes are done because of rule-based mistakes, knowledge-based mistakes, and there's memory lapse mistakes, and we'll look more into this. So there's a general guideline for preventing slips, right? What do we know about this? There's action-based slips, there's memory. So there's two things. There's a behavioral, and there's like learning and memory. So slips often happen when users are quite familiar with the goal that they seek to achieve and with the procedure for accomplishing that goal, but accidentally they take the wrong step when trying to achieve it. So while it's not always a good idea to limit users' choices, right? In cases where there are clear rules that define acceptable options, it can be a good strategy to constrain the types of input users can make. So sometimes less is better, because it prevents users from cognitive overload, and the more options you're going to throw at them, the more confused they're going to feel, and they wouldn't know which options to choose first. So you got to also offer suggestions. Similarly to how constraints guide users towards the correct use of interface, suggestions can prompt, I think this should have been like prompt, many slips before the users has the opportunity to make them. So you got to also provide them like suggestions. What are some of the things they might do, you should also choose good defaults. So what does good defaults mean? Remember, do you remember whenever you went through a website and you had to perhaps, let's say, purchase a plan or something? So if you ever went to NordVPN, let's look into it. If you go to NordVPN and we go to get the deal, we would see like they have set it to a default, which is this one. You see like it's already set up there, and although we do have the option to choose between any of these other plans, by default, it's set up here to like lead us to select whatever they're intending us to do, right? But yeah, that's basically like choosing defaults. And lastly, use forgiving formatting. Okay, let's see what does Google have to say about this. So it says that forgiving format lets user enter data in different formats and that it interprets it. So what I'm understanding is that instead of having the users fill in the forms or write a date format by themselves, what it does is perhaps provides the users with its own forms, and so that users can fill it in, and then the machine itself knows like what it's supposed to get from the user, and so it interprets it. So I don't know like why it's called forgiving format, but I think this is what it means, and that's what I have thought about it in my university days. But yes, I'd say like please do look more into it, and I would too, because I'm a little unsure about this one. Coming back, let's look into recognition rather than recall. So this is one of the things that you also got to make sure of. So you got to minimize the user's memory load by making elements, actions, and points visible. The user should not have to remember information from one part of the interface to another. Information required to use the design, example like the field labs and menu items, should be visible or easily retrievable when needed. So there's like two types of memory retrieval. One is called recognition and the other is recall. So recognition refers to our ability to recognize an event or a piece of information, while recall designates the retrieval of related details from the memory. So let's say we have some vague icons here and that doesn't say anything. We show this to a user who's not too familiar with what the icon is supposed to be. It's very hard for them to recognize it, and they have to recall like what it's supposed to mean. It's for designers to make it easier for the users, and so they should provide text on the bottom that also mentions what these icons are and what they're supposed to be, so that the users can also recognize what these icons also mean. So it's a good practice to have text right next to the icon as well. Often psychologists think of memory as organized in chunks, basic interconnected units, and each chunk can be described by its activation, and it's a measure of how easily that chunk can be retrieved by memory. So in Canada, we have like a format of number, and each country has their own, but you know, like some of these numbers are close together, and then there's like a space, and then the first three digits may be close together, then there's the 4 digits close together, and lastly there's the 4 digits that close together as well. So what it does, like it allows us to process information in chunks. So there's like 3 factors that activates that chunk in your memory, and that's how much you're familiar with it, which comes through practice. Of course, when the chatting app came out, we were getting used to it and we were practicing it, but right now it's like a second nature because we're so accustomed to how it's supposed to work. And then how recent it is, like how recently have you used it? And lastly, the context of what the app is about. So all three of these factors together activates the chunk in your memory. And recognition is easier than recall because it involves more cues, right? And in our everyday life, we often use a combination of recognition and recall to retrieve information from memory. So there's the recognition and recall part. So you go to a website, there's these forms, and you recognize that immediately that you gotta put your credentials in so that you can log in. But you recall those informations when you recall for both your ID and the password. So what your email address is and what your password is. So that's the recall part, recalling the information. And recognizing that you have to put your information here is basically because of all the cues that web page is sending to you. So you can see like it also says to promote recognition user interfaces. Again, it's the same idea. Like Amazon does this really well. They have history and previously visited content. When a user goes back to Amazon, the personalized homepage involves a list of recently viewed purchased items. These are some of the things that they might have looked into before. Keep the interface like visible and intuitive. I think this is a bad design choice because look here, with someone who doesn't have an idea of icons or is not too familiar with it, they'd be like, what the hell is that? Volvo's mobile app does not promote recognition because of the icons do not have text right next to it that doesn't say what it's supposed to do, what each of these icons are supposed to do. And so, who knows, they might risk it by clicking any of this. So it's always better to label them by text, and that's really important. So moving on, let's look into flexibility and efficiency of use. So moving to this part, flexibility and efficiency of use. Shortcuts may speed up the interaction for expert users so that the design can cater to both inexperienced and experienced users. Allow users to tailor frequent actions. Well. So what does this mean? That there's two different groups of users, right? And there's like the novice and there's the expert users, and they have different needs, of course, and the need for developmental manuals, setup wizards, and clearly labeled menus. So there's 4 guidelines that you can see here, and I've used like a small, mnemonic to remember what are the 4 guidelines, and that's like to offer quick shortcuts to help them navigate directly to the desired location. You can think of this as like a fast travel, and there's the utilize previous visited places, and there's the set the effective default values. Kind of remember what the things we talked about in the slide 5 or 6? Yeah. So it's kind of like ties to that, but let's look here. So this is like a setup wizard, and let's say this is one of a website, and that you upload your names and you upload your data, and then it processes it and then provides you with a summary. And this whole thing is a process in itself, right? So you do one and you can't move to another before completing each of these. So it's like a process. So this is a setup wizard. So it's offering you like it's guiding you on how to go through this entire process. Then there's the keyboard shortcuts, right? There's the Command C or Command Z in Mac, right? And you don't have to like manually click on the keyboard, manually click the mouse all the time and select for copy and paste. You can definitely do it like pretty faster. Then you're also allowed to customize your home screen, and you can see like you have a customizable interface for iOS now. Well, Android has done that for years, but then you gotta pay attention to multiple methods to accomplish the same task. So something that you could have just written it by typing it out could also be done by voice dictation. This is one of the examples of accessibility. We will learn more about this in our future videos. And there's the swiping and gestures. Instead of like clicking back and forward, maybe, like most of you have used Tinders, there's left or right to select. And then there's whenever you open a picture on a photos, you have like pinch in and out, which is this one, to zoom in and out. And there's like a long press. Back in the days, it used to be called 3D touch in iOS. And when you're using browsers or any sort of files, you can change between tabs by with shortcuts by clicking Command 1 or 2. So what it does is it shifts between the tabs that you want to navigate. Also, like, I really love this drag and drop. You can just hold it and put it in, and it's just gonna quickly like utilize that action, right? It's going to offer you like it basically offers you a very quick shortcut rather than like double clicking it, and instead of doing all that, all you just have to do is like a drag and drop it to the folder. You also have to find new ways that could accomplish the same task that functions and as faster than the typical methods. So you can see like normally people would type it out whatever it is that they're wanting to do, but in this case in iOS, what you could do is like you can swipe among the keyboard and it's going to suggest you what you were looking for, and then you can have it on the browser. And not necessarily it is going to be accurate 100% of the time, but definitely saves you a lot more time. This is my favorite one, aesthetics and minimal design. So to say that pleasing designs can provide memorable experiences that differentiate a brand. However, interfaces should not only include necessary elements with high informational value. Clarity will always win over visual flourish. What are some of the companies that you can think of when we talk about aesthetics and minimal design? But let's first understand, what does aesthetics and minimalism, all these things mean? So definition of aesthetics here means that Visually pleasing UX design refers to creating user experiences that are appealing, engaging, and enjoyable. These are three of the main driving factors here. The approach involves implementing graphic design principles such as color typography, white space imagery, and visual feedback to craft a visual composition. Such an approach aims to enhance user satisfaction, enable the user to connect emotionally with product, and convey a recognizable and memorable brand presence. Not just does it create a brand presence, but I think creates a image of the brand itself. So let's see some of these brands. There's a new tool out there called Plot that records, that uses AI for recording, and it also like provides you with a complete transcript of whatever the conversation you had with the other person. Then, of course, we all know about this, Dyson. They have a really aesthetic looking product, and therefore the price. Of course, my favorite, iOS or Apple, they have always been a design first company, and that's one of the reasons I really like them. And there's also Uber's user interface, and never mind the location, but you can see like it's so clean, and so you can shift between Uber rides and Uber Eats. But I think it's just amazing the way this whole thing has been designed. Well, why not just minimalism design, and do aesthetics really matter? Okay, visuals are essential to establish good first impression, right? And the perception of experience can be more memorable than the experience itself. Well, minimal design, maximum utility. A minimalist design limits the amount of noise, and interface has its order to emphasize necessary information. It is a design that seeks to simplify interface by removing unnecessary elements or content that does not support user tasks. Let's look into it. So, look into this website. Tell me what you think is wrong or right with it. So, the Hello Bar homepage is extremely minimalist in visual style, right? Like, it just throws at you the search bar and it's like, go on, search it, right? And all of this is like, there's so much space, as you can see, and this whole thing is like maxed out in the font size and even the size of the search bar itself. And there is not sufficient information about what the company does or what features are available. Thus, while it may follow the minimalist design trend, it does not satisfy the heuristic because it does not have necessary information in an easily findable place. All it does is like convert visitors into customers with Hello Bar, but it doesn't say enough of what it does. Because of like how minimalist they were trying to be, they have lost some of the crucial information that a user might be looking for. Then there's this website called 16personalities.com, and it has a notably minimalist visual style, highly textured and intricate visual elements, and fully utilized pages with little white space. And I think this website satisfies the heuristics approach because we know what this website is about. We can read through like what is going on here, and then there's also like an explore and navigation option on the left. So it takes advantage of the whole entire space. So these are the 6 points. I'm not going to go through this, but please do read through it. And definitely I would love to explain this part, which is, see, you can think of aesthetics and functionality of two different sets, right? Most of you have taken maths courses or discrete maths before, or even in high school, right? Like there's like sets, and all these factors here are the subsets of aesthetics. All these here are the subsets of functions, right? And when these two overlap, at some point, some of this functionality and some of these aesthetics are going to overlap as well. And so this is what you want to aim for, this whole area. This is the zone you want to aim for, because this is where you're bringing in aesthetics and you're also bringing in functionality. You're not sacrificing one for the other. We're almost there. You also have to make sure that users are able to recognize, diagnose, and recover from errors. Well, what do they say? Error messages should be expressed in plain languages. No error codes precisely indicate the problem and constructively suggest a solution. So not only are you going to tell them there's an error, but you also have to provide with a solution as to what could they be possibly doing. So the first one being assist users in problems solving by providing constructive guidance on why errors occurred and how to resolve them efficiently. So for sure, provide them clear language. Don't throw jargons. They wouldn't know what you're talking about. And you want to make their life easier given that they're already going through something. Also, be very specific. Don't be vague in expression. I found this somewhere on the internet. It used to be pretty, this was a big meme back in the days. I don't know if this is even considered as a meme, but yeah, don't use, be very specific and precise in what you're stating, and use positive wording, please. Like, do not get personal with them. It's nothing personal. People make mistakes. They don't understand how process works, and that's completely fine. And that's what your job is to do, to make it easy for people. And on number 2, it says visibility guideline. These are some of the guidelines you should follow. So display the error messages close to the error source. So this is a bad practice, as you can see. Like, this is from Instagram, and you provide a link here and it says enter a valid URL. What it could have done instead, at least that's my suggestion, you could have provided a box here, and the box could have turned like red or something, and that would instantly give you feedback that this whole URL is not valid, right? So display the error message close to the error source. So yeah, LinkedIn, if you're watching this, please fix it. And this is a good example because you can see that Amazon utilizes several techniques to indicate an error: broader highlighting, iconography, and red texts. So here you can see your total comes down to something like this. Your eye will catch up on this, but if it was to be black and small text, it would be hard for you to find out. And if there's information missing, it also lets you know. The yellow color stands out from the whole website because to show that it's a button and whether or not if you want to send this as a gift option. So amazing job. And I think this website, Gold, uses a message without conventional red formatting to notify users about potential shipping delays. As you can see, there's a yellow with an icon that says that due to some weather inconvenient, whatever, it might be delayed. But yeah, these are some of the bedrock of design, because you got to make sure that whatever you're delivering, it has to be something that the user enjoys, because you are literally designing the user experience. And on number 3, again, I think it's quite the same thing. No. And on number 3, you got to communicate guideline. These are some of the communication guidelines. Use human readable languages. Again, like all these informations, then the points we have read about before, it's all quite similar, somewhat or the other. But yeah, concisely and precisely describe the issue, offer constructive advice, take a positive tone, and don't blame the user. So this one is pretty bad. Now you might think like, why is it so? Because there's like cat photos in it. But when searching for dining locations with a very narrow filters, Disney World, I don't know what that's supposed to mean. The lack of results with puns instead of clearly conveying the situation. All right. So Disney being Disney, what they try to do here is like, when you searched something with filters, it didn't suggest you of like, what could you have possibly done other than that. What they do is they throw a picture of like 3 cats, which doesn't help you at all, right? So all they say is like clear all filters, but what they could have possibly done is provide you an alternative of what could have been done. This is a good practice here, right? So Target gives clear feedback that users must spend more to qualify for the same day shipping. Note how the message avoids blaming the user for not purchasing enough and focuses instead on the threshold. So you see the language here, add a $33.50 or more to checkout. Same day delivery is only available for orders. It's not blaming the user. It's not like, hey, you still need to do this, because that's personal. It's blaming goes from the app to the user. So it's not supposed to do something like that. And lastly, there's the efficiency guidelines. Safeguard against likely mistakes, preserve the user input, reduce error correction effort, concisely educate on how the system works, mitigate failure with novelty in dire situations. We'll see about that. Well, I really like this. So on Gmail, it has evolved to detect and warn about common email mistakes, such as forgetting to include attachment. So you wrote down here on the email that you have some sort of attachment, but it then says that you haven't added anything. You might want to do that. So see the tone here. It's not blaming the users. It's saying that you wrote something like see attached, but do you still want to send it because there's nothing in it yet, right? Then on Instagram, what it does is like, if you take a picture and it's like, if the user navigates back while adding an image to an Instagram story, the system provides an option to save their work as a draft to avoiding losing it. Instead of having to re-upload it, you can like still save it as a draft on Instagram. And lastly, there's the help and documentation. And it says that help and documentation content should be easy for search and focused on the user's task. Keep it concise and list concrete steps that needs to be carried out. Well, the first one being proactive help. The aim of proactive assistance is to familiarize users with an interface. Proactive help typically arises in three situations: new users during their initial interaction with an interface, novice users as they become more skilled with an interface, and existing users when they encounter a new or a redesigned interface. Well, so there's two types of interface helps. There's the proactive and reactive. The first one being it aims to familiarize users with an interface, and the second one is aims to answer questions and troubleshoots problem. So let's see what does proactive help do. It has two different features. One is push revelations, and there is a pull one, and we'll look into that too. So the first one occurs when an interface provides assistance or help content that isn't relevant to the users. So you can see on this website, you can think of it like a trial or something like that, or a demo that actually these bubbles pop up and tell you what's going on here. And the other one being the pull revelation. And the other one basically appears when the mouse is near corresponding controls or when the user has started a corresponding flow. So on Words, you can see that Microsoft Word recognized that a user was working on a resume and provided a tip to see resume suggestion from LinkedIn. This is an example of pull revelation because it is triggered by the individual user's behavior, not push to users. So think of this like push is basically from the system to the user, and pull is more like from the user to the system. I'm not going to go through all of this because I think we're running out of time, but here's reactive help, how to do that and the goal of it. So please read through this as well. And now lastly, you might be asking, so what's the point of all of this, right? Let's talk about the application of design heuristics. And I've divided this into 4 different parts: the what's, why, when, and how. So what is it? As we have gone through it, we know that it's a inspection method. It's a framework that designers use to make sure that the design follows a standard, and it satisfies the usability heuristics. Why do we do it? Because it helps us with early detection of usability issues. It helps us reduce cost. It's an independent review. When do we do it? It's usually typically conducted during the design and development phase of a product, and after the initial has been created, but before any extensive user testing has taken place. So you can think of like in the beginning phase, it's more of that what it's done. It's usually done in the beginning phase rather than being later. And this is why it saves you a lot of money, because you are dodging a lot of issues firsthand in the first trial. And how do we do that? Of course, the 4 things. We identify the problem, we apply heuristics creatively. We also gotta first understand the context as to which one we're doing. And then we evaluate a solution, and we keep reiterating and refining it until we have all agreed to a certain point that, you know what, at this point it looks fine and this is doable. And we're almost done now. Finally, I'm just going to summarize everything so far, and I have created something here. So this is a very important tool for all UX designers, and there are some things you have to memorize. I know I know how much I hate memorizing things rather than understanding, but because we have understood how this whole process works, there are still a few things we have to memorize. We have to keep in mind what are some of these things, right? So if ever anybody asks you, like, what are the 10 design heuristics? That's something for you to know, and the only way to do that is by memorizing it. And I came up with one of the ways that I used to memorize back in my college days. So remember when I talked about chunking? Yeah, so we are going to use chunking here, and we are going to use this as a spell, right? So let's see. And here's an overall summary of everything I've talked about. And yes, keep repeating this chunk as a spell. But yes, here are all the 10 design heuristics I've talked to you about. And if you want, you can take a screenshot of this. You can save this somewhere, what each of the 10 heuristic evaluations are. And that's pretty much it. And thank you once again. Thanks a lot for watching this video. And especially thanks to Nielsen Norman Group. I have copied and cited most of my references to their page, and that's pretty much it. Thank you so much.